In a small African village where the roads were dusty and promises were fragile, lived a woman named Nala. She was known for her silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because life had taught her that words often leave before people do. Every evening, just before sunset, Nala sat outside her home with an old wooden chair and watched the road. She told herself she was only watching the sky change colors, but deep inside, she knew she was waiting. Waiting without knowing for whom. Waiting without knowing why. Years ago, someone had walked down that same road and disappeared from her life without explanation. No goodbye, no fight, just absence. And absence, she learned, can be louder than betrayal. The village moved on. Children grew. Seasons changed. But Nala's heart stayed in one moment. The moment hope didn't leave, it simply went quiet. That evening, as the wind carried dust across the road, something felt different. Her chest tightened, her hands trembled. For the first time in years, footsteps approached, and Nala didn't know if she was ready to look. The footsteps stopped just a few steps from her gate. Nala lifted her eyes slowly, as if looking too fast might break whatever moment this was. And there he stood. Older. Thinner. Carrying the weight of years on his face. It was Kofi. The man who once promised to return before the rains came, and never did. For a second, neither of them spoke. Some silences are not empty. They are heavy with everything that was never said. Kofi's voice finally broke through. I didn't know if you would still be here. Nala almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the truth cut deep. She had stayed when she shouldn't have. She had waited when she should have lived. Her heart remembered him instantly, but her soul hesitated. He looked at the ground, ashamed. I left to find a better life, he said softly. I lost myself instead. Nala listened, her face calm, her emotions hidden behind years of strength. She noticed his shaking hands. She noticed the regret in his eyes. But what hurt most was how familiar his absence still felt. They sat across from each other, the space between them filled with years that could never be returned. Kofi began to speak, not to explain himself, but to confess. He told her about the city that promised too much and gave too little, about nights spent hungry, surrounded by strangers who never asked his name, about the letters he wrote but never sent, because shame became heavier than love. Nala listened without interruption. As he spoke, memories played quietly inside her mind, not of him, but of herself. The days she worked until her hands ached, the nights she cried where no one could hear her, the strength she learned not by choice but by survival. You don't know how many times I came back in my mind, Kofi whispered, but I was afraid you wouldn't recognize me. That was when Nala finally spoke. I recognized you every day, she said, in my waiting, in my silence, in my loneliness. Her voice did not shake, but her heart did. This was not the reunion she once dreamed of. It was the truth she never asked for.
Nala stood up slowly and looked at Kofi, not with anger, not with love, but with understanding. For a moment, she saw the man she once waited for, but then she saw the woman she had become. I forgive you, she said quietly. Not for him, but for herself. Kofi looked at her with hope in his eyes, hope that came years too late. But forgiveness, Nala continued, does not mean returning to the past. She explained how waiting had taught her strength, how loneliness had shaped her into someone who no longer feared being alone, how love, when abandoned, must learn to let go. Kofi lowered his head. He finally understood. As he walked away, the road looked longer than before. That evening, Nala did not sit by the road. She closed her gate, not out of bitterness, but out of peace. Some people return to remind us of who we were, not to reclaim us, but to release us. And that night, under the African sky, Nala chose herself. Subscribe for more African tales of love, loss, and life lessons.